Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, we're very happy to have Allie back with us. Allie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And we wanted to bring you in as we talk about this second Rand essay in our series. This one is Establishing of an Establishment that she wrote in 1972. And, you know, I often find myself railing against the establishment. So I went back and, you know, kind of reread the piece and just found some fascinating quotes in there. So I look forward to going through it with both of you and seeing what we think.
Yeah, I think she wrote this when she was 67 years old. So I'd like to point that out in the beginning because it will become relevant later. But I like this essay a lot. I think she makes a lot of great points. And there's a lot of broad points she makes, which we can dig into.
I agree. Good. Well, so she starts off about how staleness is the dominant characteristic of today's culture. And that was 50 years ago. She says there's a stagnant monotony across stage and screen literature and the arts. This must have been 72 before The Godfather came out. I'm kidding. That's one of my favorite movies. But I actually agree with what she's saying in a sense. I mean, unless you compare it to 50 years later and there's hardly anything but remakes and comic book movies coming out.
Yeah, she's saying that the culture is stale. And her view of a fresh culture is, quote, a startling, different, fresh, unexpected one. I think this is where I disagree right in the beginning, but I'll agree with a lot of her points later. I think that because she was older, 67 years old, she probably had seen a lot, you know, been there, done that, and she wasn't into the new culture at the time in the 70s. And, you know, people say that the 70s was the me decade. I think
right.
that Tom Wolfe quoted that as the me decade. So I think there was a lot going on in the 70s for the young people, the young generation, and really culture, I think, is mostly primarily for the younger generation to get them motivated to, you know, go through life and meet a mate and have a family. So culture's not really for the older generation. The older generation has developed their values. They like the music they like the movies they like, but the new movies, the new music, that's all going to be tailored to the younger generation. So that might be affecting her view of the culture at the time. I think that, yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I think that to some degree, you know, it's generational. That, you know, nothing that these young kids doing are any good. But I think that beyond, and that is a factor that seems to be part of the life process. But within that, there can be kind of a longer term objective look about, you know, whether things are getting better or worse. I mean, I feel the same way. I feel the same way about, you know, movies that came out after 2000.
Yeah, I mean, well, there were a lot of good movies in the 70s. And also, I'd like to point out that the microprocessor started in the 70s. Actually, I looked this up, and the Intel 4004 was in 1971. So she was writing this in 1972. A year later, computers were just coming out. So, I mean, the home computers or, you know, the commercial computers were just coming out. So she was it seems like she was like in between this cultural shift where, especially in the technological realm.
I think she's talking more about art than the technological realm or the culture.
She could be.
I think they're intertwined a little bit. I mean, I think technology, like you make technical advances in art that drive like the different media, you know, like so motion picture and sciences is something that is developed, you know, it keeps getting to your point, like more digital and more advanced, and they can do all these digital effects. But the underlying principles are what I think kind of determine the, like, is it good art, is it bad art, or like what's going to make it like I think there's two kind of veins in art, and one is the postmodern vein, and then you have like this Aristotelian vein still. So it's almost like how it's like a bifurcation of, there are people that they're still using Aristotle's principles to kind of create the art and use the science of film. They're using the story arcs, act one, act two, act three. But then you've got this postmodern kind of waiting for Godot. That kind of deconstructs Aristotle and takes away plot and takes away the hero and then you've got this kind of anti-rational kind of vein in art. But which one's dominant right now is definitely, I think, the postmodern vein.
Yeah, I think there is this mixture of, our culture is a mix of the good and the bad. And I think it's a broad mixture. So it's hard, and sometimes it can be hard to tell which trend is dominant. How much is our culture irrational versus rational? But Rand likes to speak in absolutes, and she would say in this article, there is nothing to see or to hear. And so she's like trying to emphasize that it's all bad. There's like nothing good, nothing worth seeing or hearing. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's an exaggeration. It's hyperbolic. I think the article would have been much better if she had gone and drilled into some, newer cultural phenomena and described exactly what she meant.
That's a fair charge. What she says, the symptoms of today's cultural disease, again, this is 1972, she describes it as conformity with nothing to conform to, timidity expressed by concern with trivia, anxiety to please the unknown standards of some non-existent authority, and a pall of fear without object. And again, comparatively to me, these seem like the good old days before wokeism took hold. Now there is something to conform to. And I agree, there's timidity expressed by concern with trivia, like declaring who's a real objectivist, often as a way to avoid bigger cultural fights. But the anxiety to please unknown standards relates to how, CRT sees consistent standards themselves as some sort of, binary, cis, normative, bigoted view.
I think that she's focusing on the bad, obviously, and she's making these broad generalizations. And she doesn't give many examples. I think she gave one example in here, or she goes into one example in depth, which is the government grants. But she mostly focuses on the economy here and how the government affects the economy. I think to make her broader point that the culture is in decline, she could have gone into movies and art and other aspects of the culture to make her point.
But she does make a crucial point about these symptoms. She says, psychologically, this is the cultural atmosphere of a society living under censorship, before she adds, but there is no censorship in the United States. And to me, this starts to address the argument between objectivists on whether or not there is censorship. I mean, she's saying there's no censorship by her official definition of the term, that it has to come from a government. Yet we're moving towards a cultural atmosphere where it's psychologically the same. I mean, to me, she's talking about self-censorship.
Yeah, well, the U.S., I also looked this up. There's a history of censorship in the U.S. So when she says there is no censorship in 1972, that comes after a lot of efforts to remove some censorship in the U.S. Like they used to censor what you could say in books. A lot of books were banned. Some books were still banned in the 70s. But they would also ban what you could say politically or say about sex, and people were jailed over this. It goes back, I think, to the founders, where you couldn't criticize certain politicians or you get jailed, or you couldn't criticize the government during war and you get jailed. So,
well, they still have the FCC still like censors words, that people get bleeped.
Yeah, this is a point I was going to bring up as well. Glad you mentioned that, because There is still censorship, but it's limited to the areas of the economy that the government controls. So I think this is something Rand didn't focus on, is that just because there's no universal censorship in America, that doesn't mean there's no censorship. There is censorship in radio, anything that the government controls, like the airwaves or schools or some parts of the medical industry. They get to tell you what you can do and say because they are de facto owners of that industry.
Rand discusses that later when she gets into what an establishment is. And I think she agrees with you when she's saying, as a mixed economy, we're changed by an enormous tangle of government controls, but it's argued they affect our incomes, not our minds, but that such a distinction is not tenable. So she's saying then that the culture wars affect all aspects of our lives, not just economics.
Right. Yeah, she makes the connection between mind and body, ideas and action. So if you apply that to anything the government controls, they're going to have the ideas behind the actions in that industry. So they're going to be in charge of telling you what you can do and say in schools and things like that. And since the government is the people, then the local school board or people who are interested in what goes on in the schools, they're going to vote for people who will ban the books they want to ban or ban the words they want to ban.
I think later in the essay, she kind of addresses this, I think, with the kind of the average person, like if they're trying to go, if someone young is trying to go into the arts or sciences, they're already facing kind of this anonymous face of the establishment that's there. They can't to come up with brilliant new ideas or do something bold. Like there's this kind of built into the establishment, there's kind of this desire for mediocrity, and it's to overcome that, you have to be a genius or you have to have billions of dollars or millions of dollars. It becomes harder for somebody young to kind of break into these fields when you have this establishment there. So maybe she's kind of addressing, that's what this kind of silent or this timidity is about,
Yeah, you remind me of Tui's speech in The Fountainhead, where he says to kill greatness and shrine mediocrity. But Rand continues that she kind of answers. She says, if you find it puzzling why people are keeping silent while their culture's perishing, that, quote, the premise to check is the idea that government repression is the only way a government can destroy the intellectual life of a country. It is not. There is another way, governmental encouragement, which is a crucial point. Besides outright censorship, government also uses their power to push certain viewpoints. Like you were saying, William, whatever Fauci is saying that day, for example. I mean, Rand is calling out people keeping silent while their culture is perishing. The government encouragement also makes so much more of us involved with government or working for them, like you said, whether they're teachers or, or even getting our relief checks for whatever the latest disaster is.
Yeah, you mentioned Tui, and I think this is Rand's brilliant insight, is that you can also affect cultural change by using government to encourage certain ideas, encourage certain actions. So they'll use the taxes to support research support B.F. Skinner's research in behaviorism or something like that. And today they encourage research on wokeism or whatever they're doing in the sciences. And that might actually be the primary way that the culture gets destroyed today, is just simply by encouraging bad ideas and bad actions, bad people.
At least they've got an agenda.
And but you got to ask, how did we get to this point? Why are these the people in charge? And that's what I want to get to, because I think that's the critical question is, okay, we identify that this is the process or method being used to destroy the culture, but why is that the method or process? How did we get to this point? How are these people? How did they get there?
I think we've lived through a huge cultural change where back when she was writing, the censors or would-be censors and moralizers were maybe more of a religious conservative distinction. But then as wokeism has taken cultural control, now the censors are looking more for things like inclusivity or, making sure there's no cis language or whatever their criteria is these days.
But I think it goes back to a mistake with allowing the executive branch agencies to grow so big. And I think, if you went by the Constitution, you have only Congress can pass laws. But then they pass these sweeping acts, like these, APA acts or whatever the, topic of the day is. They'll like pass something that's like so sweeping, and then it funds these government agencies, which just keep growing and growing in power. And to the point that you have these like nameless, faceless bureaucrats running everything, the kind of the privileged elite that she talks about.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's to some extent, I think it involves just raw power, because this is one aspect of the left that I think the left gets right. They understand that at the base of government is just power. It's who has the power. Whoever has the power can dictate the methods, the functions of government, what they say and what they do, and how they treat people. So if you're not willing to pursue power, you're not going to get into government. You're not going to change government. You're not going to affect society.
And it's just the abusers that get into government.
Yeah, people who don't care about your rights. Well, they're just seeking power, and so they have an advantage. So the people who are interested in protecting individual rights need to start thinking about just going for power, because we're losing the power. And if we lose the power, we're going to lose our rights. So we can't be afraid. We have to stop being afraid of violating the free speech rights of people who don't care about free speech.
I think people in the liberty movement don't want to be seen as trying to take power that they just leave a vacuum out there for those willing to fill it.
Yeah, they're afraid of being criticized by the left. I mean, the left will use your values against you. That's one of their principles, right? So they know that that's where our weakness is. We tolerate evil, and so they use that so-called virtue against us.
And now they have government backing with this, the disinformation board they have, and hopefully that'll get pushed back and disbanded. But I mean, when you talk about government encouragement, I think it's like a great way to identify what's happening with this kind of censorship by proxy and like or censorship by surrogate censorship. It's still censorship. If the government if the president comes out and says, oh, we need more silencing of disinformation on these platforms, and then those private entities do that, they're still acting under government authority.
Rand says government encouragement does not order men to believe that the false is true. It merely makes them indifferent to the issue of truth or falsehood. I have to go back to a line from the movie Flash Gordon, where they're trying to give Dale Arden an aphrodisiac while she's trapped in Ming's chamber. Dale asks the servant, "Will it make me forget?" And the servant replies, "It will make you not mind remembering." It's basically what the government's doing. Go ahead.
It's like the banality of evil too. It's just like, it's always, I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. It's just this nameless, faceless bureaucrat, or this nameless, faceless like person doing something that they always couch it in, we're doing something good for you, or, oh, look, you won't mind not remembering, it's just so.
Yeah.
It's not like an outright violent force that you can say, okay, this is definitely evil. It's like 1,000 things that happen behind the scenes,
It's it's a million sellouts you have to do every day.
Well, when you're an industry, like the medical industry, and you have thousands of pages of regulations to deal with, that starts to become a stress on your business. and you start having to worry about what the regulators are going to do, or what the government is going to take from you, or tell you what to do. So there might be any number or combination of factors or regulations that they decide we can't risk the government coming after us on this issue. So we're just going to bend the knee and do it before, and like please them or do something to make them happy so they don't pay attention to us. It starts becoming an avoidance game. You don't want the government to come after you, so you try to play nice with them, and that ends up you being a proxy of the government force, because the government is trying to force them to do something, but not directly.
It even happens with flight attendants, ready to have the plane landed if we don't follow their instructions.
Yeah.
And be met by, airport security. But Rand uses this preface to then give some examples of government funding academic studies, which we take for granted today. But she's, talking about the National Institute of Mental Health giving $283,000 to B.F. Skinner, the well-known behaviorist psychologist. He was known for Skinner's box. I guess he put his daughter in a box to see how she reacted. But Rand also criticizes a congressman who wants to form a committee to counter anti-democratic thoughts like Skinner's. And she also criticizes the left-wing New Republic, which wants instead to create an intellectual orthodoxy instead of a government one. She says, but neither Representative Gallagher nor the New Republic chose to see the answer, that those evils are inherent in the vicious impropriety of the government subsidizing ideas. Both chose to ignore the fact that any intrusion of government into the field of ideas for or against anyone withers intellectual freedom and creates an official orthodoxy, a privileged elite. Today, it is called an establishment. So even then, she's seeing how the left, even 50 years ago, wanted an intellectual orthodoxy. And this is also related, I think, to the intellectual orthodoxy among the expert class, and it even reaches to objectivism. There are what I call orthodox objectivists.
Yeah, so she says nothing could be as dangerous a threat to our institutions as a proposal to establish a government committee to deal with anti-democratic thoughts or B.F. Skinner's thoughts or anyone's thoughts. I think she's on the right track here. I think she's identifying a critical principle that when you try to control people's thoughts, and that is a curtail of individual rights or violation of individual rights. But what she's not getting at, which I would like to see more discussion about, is whether certain thoughts should be considered free speech. Because certain thoughts like, threatening someone's life, we don't generally consider that to be free speech, because it's kind of the initiation of violence. You're threatening to commit violence, and violence starts with a thought. So I think that she could have identified certain aspects of the socialist theory as a threat against individuals, but in a collective, like they threaten the whole society they threaten to take away the rights and just institutionalize a dictatorship, basically.
I'm not opposed to that. I think the purpose of the essay was to kind of identify the establishment that's happening. I mean, what you're talking about is just a little bit of a wider scope.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's, again, I think she's taking a free speech absolutist view. And I think that's a problem, because it allows this, it prevents the government from protecting itself. So a government has to protect itself in order to protect you. If we allow people who want to destroy our government into the government, then we're not going to have a government that protects us. We're going to have a government that protects socialists. or it is a socialist government. So this is what I'm trying to get at, is that there are certain things that a government has to believe and has to support and defend, which could be considered an ideological orthodoxy. Like, our government protects individual rights, so it has to believe in individual rights. We can't have a government that's just like, oh, individual rights doesn't matter, and so whatever government you have is okay. No, we have a constitution, we have rights. That's the intellectual orthodoxy.
I wouldn't say that's not ideology though. That's based in the nature of man. Man has needs to use his mind to survive, so it needs to be
But
free.
any ideology is a system of ideas. So your ideas are based on, ideally, you would want your ideas to be based on reality and objective truth. So you have a system of ideas, and it can be correct or it can be wrong. So I'm saying we need a government that has the correct ideology. And go ahead.
At some point, the whole point of checks and balances is that, if there's just one, that's going to lead to, there's still individuals in the government. So, you can just then start committing rights violations and claiming you're acting for individual rights.
Well, this goes to the power thing. If you agree that you need to pursue power in order to pursue the correct ideas and have a government of the correct ideas, then you have to trust whoever you're siding, whoever you're backing, you're supporting. You need to trust them that when they get the power, they're going to protect individual rights, because they have all along been supporting individual rights. Go ahead.
We need to make sure that if it's not the party that I'm supporting, that at least they're still going to respect my rights too.
Well, why would you if they're socialists?
Well, I mean, that is just the basis of the rule of law, that we're all going to respect each other's rights.
But if they're telling you ahead of time that they're not going to protect your rights, why would you expect them to do so?
I feel like this is going back towards your Socialist Exclusion Act, building your rationale.
It's not exclusion, it's socialist control.
Okay, well.
But I think that you can only violate someone's rights by violence, right? So going back to what you said, William, about, is there a certain speech that should be outlawed? It's like, no, I think you have to say that the First Amendment and free speech, like I am for open and just unmitigated free speech. It's not, words are not violence. So if I say something, and there's a lot of you hear, especially in politics, people talk about the battleground, or we need to keep the fight up. And so, I mean, where do you draw the line of somebody trying to, talk about an intellectual battle or a war even, and then somebody actually saying like a call to arms and a threat, I mean, I think you have to, I see things on Twitter all the time, like a call to arms and defending what they're doing with this, at the SCOTUS houses. But you have to say, no, the people showing up at SCOTUS houses, those are the ones that are violating someone's rights.
Well, I draw the line at a threat to destroy the person or the institution that protects individual rights, or who has individual rights or protects individual rights. So if you have a government or a society based on individualism, based on individual rights, then you can't allow people to threaten to destroy that. And you can let them talk in their own private forums, but I'm saying don't let them into government. Don't let them run for government. They can't be your government officials. That's what
they're doing now. They're saying they don't like the idea of a particular political group, and they're trying to say they can't even hold office.
Right. That's basically what they say about Republicans or MAGA or whatever line they want to draw.
Yeah, but they have to prove it objectively. I'm saying we would have to prove objectively that a particular socialist is not, shouldn't be a candidate for the government because it wants to destroy our way of life, wants to destroy our government.
We'll have to consider that as my point is that, once someone considers themselves the elites of any group, they start excluding others they deem unworthy, and even come to defend the existing establishment. In fact, here's your own Brooke talking about those who question the establishment on something as admittedly as controversial as ivermectin, and he's convinced they're not hacks.
Again, unless you do the analysis and go through every one of those studies, you should be skeptical about these kind of things. And there's a reason why, quote, the so-called evil establishment of scientists, doctors, private scientists, private doctors, researchers don't go for this. It's because they actually do the work. They're not hacks.
So that's kind of a broad brush. I mean, does he even believe it's possible for government experts to be hacks? I mean, why does he think the establishment is more worthy of the benefit of the doubt in the last 50 years of consolidating their power?
Yeah, I think it's a symptom of the establishment that she's talking about, that you all of a sudden you have these experts that you can't challenge.
That's right. I mean, it's like they talk about 97% of climate scientists agree. And if you're one of the 3%, you can forget about any funding.
Well, and she brings that up too. She says, science, it doesn't work by consensus and vote. I mean, that's not how it works. You don't. So they're trying to, the establishment is always saying they have the numbers on their side, or they have they control the scientists basically. So we're right, but that's not how science works.
Right.
I haven't heard the whole clip, or the whole episode, but one thing that strikes me about this is that so first he's saying that if you haven't read all the studies, you haven't done your homework, then you should be skeptical. You shouldn't come to a conclusion.
It's like the schism thing.
Yeah, but it's also not recognizing how reason works. Reason, you don't have to go through every little bit of evidence. You don't have to hear everything anyone has to say on a topic. You have to figure out what the truth is according to reality. So you have to you have to look for the best study, what you consider the best expert, and what you consider the best study or research, and then compare that to reality and see if it matches up or correlates, and do your own thinking. You don't then have to read all the other stupid surveys that you see immediate flaws in, or you don't even care about because you don't trust that person, you don't trust that doctor. He's going about this wrong. I don't think you need to survey the entire register of evidence in order to come to a rational conclusion.
Or
just listen to what he says.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's how they stay in power. It's like the the 70,000 grants that nobody can even track the funding for, and it becomes such a voluminous kind of heroic tax to even to follow the money even to where things are going. I mean, much less go through all of those the research from those grants and everything. It's like you can't be, not everybody can analyze it. You do have to use just basic common sense.
Right.
Well, it's like they're imposing an impossible standard on you. Like, how are you going to read all those surveys? I mean, if I don't read all the studies and surveys, then I can't have an opinion. This is ridiculous.
Trust us.
Rand continues talking about how the New Republic says that the government paying Skinner actually benefits Harvard where he teaches, to rationalize it. But Rand makes this astute observation: consider the desperate financial plight of private universities, then ask yourself what a bonanza of this kind will do to them. It's generally known that most universities now depend on government research projects as one of their major sources of income. The government grant to those senior researchers establish every recipient as an official government power. It is his influence, his ideas, his theories, his preferences in faculty hiring that will come to dominate the school in a silent, unadmitted way. What debt-ridden college administrator would dare antagonize the carrier of the bonanza?
This is a great point that she's making here. And this is why the essay lives on, I think, is because of this identification in how the government gets its claws into an industry and then pumps it full of money to push that industry in a certain direction. It's how fascism takes hold, I think.
Yeah, or an oligarchy. She's based. Go ahead, Allison.
No, I mean, you can see it, I mean, in real time happening. I mean, they just, they just have that, they established that by public law, which didn't really have any debate. It passed as part of a hurricane funding relief bill, but now it's got this advanced research project agency under the National Institutes of Health. It's ARPA for health. They also have ARPA for climate. I'm not sure if that's passed yet, but they have $6 billion over like the next 3 years to do all this research. And I was going through the notes, and like some of these, they're only going to outside, private companies to do the research, and they're funding it. And they're trying to make this, transformative, disruptive, all these health advancements that are going to help people. And then one of the scientists was like, well, how do we know that our research is disruptive and transformational enough to meet, this new objective that you have under ARPA? And the answer was, well, we'll send out the advisories and we'll tell you.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so now the scientists are just sitting there, not only they're just like chomping at the bit for this money, but they're going to have to wait for what is the area of research that we should even like focus on. So they're like, I mean, it's beyond, it's so corrupt now. It's like they're dictating what scientists are doing.
Yeah. And that's what Rand's saying. This government sanction is almost inherently corrupting. And that now what matters is getting the approval of the funders. In choosing recipients, she goes on to say, when personal judgment is inoperative or forbidden, men's first concern is not how to choose, but how to justify their choice. This will necessarily prompt committee members, bureaucrats, and politicians to gravitate towards prestigious names. The result is to help establish those already established and to entrench the status quo. And Anthony Fauci has been the head of the NIAID for 38 years. That is the status quo. The establishment has been fully established.
There's no accountability at all. I mean, like if you look at the results, if you had given as much money to someone in the private sector to improve disease and public health, which is their whole objective, like by no standard have we as the American people benefited at all. We have the same leading causes of death after almost half a century. It's still heart disease, it's still cancer. Diabetes has gotten worse. Now we've got Alzheimer's, which is like out of control. And like if you look at life expectancy, if you were using that as a measure, it's completely flat. Like there's been hardly any significant increase in life expectancy. It's even gone down at certain times. So
they'll say if you wouldn't have listened to them, it would have been worse. But Rand goes on to say, the awarders may hide behind the notion that in choosing recognized leaders, they're acting democratically and rewarding men chosen by the public. But there is no democracy in this field. Science and the mind do not work by vote or consensus. The best known is not necessarily the best, nor is the least known for that matter. But since no rational standards are applicable, the awarders' methods lead to concern with personalities, not ideas, pull, not merit, prestige, not truth. The result is rule by press agents. So,
that's a great line.
Yeah, except now you need to include some historically marginalized identity group, even if announced by your press agent.
Yeah, and we still see that today. We got the press agents talking for everybody, and you never really hear from the thinkers who are coming up with this crap. It's just the protesters on the streets and the people who speak for the masses. I guess this is a symptom of rule by the masses. You get these press agents who then start to represent groups of people.
Yeah, I mean, and it can even be the person. It's just whoever's in charge of spinning the latest talking points. But I think she offers her main principle when she says, the fundamental evil of government grants is the fact that men are forced to pay for the support of ideas diametrically opposed to their own. This is a profound violation of an individual's integrity and conscience. it is viciously wrong to take the money of rational men for the support of B.F. Skinner, or vice versa. So, you know, that's, again, as bad as that is, it's worse when people in government are only considering grants based on ideological affinity, whether it's, the 97% consensus on global warming. And, she has another piece about the wreckage of the consensus. So, but I mean, that's what we see. We see, oh, these people said ivermectin's bad. They may be giving it in Japan, but just accept it's bad. And so, that's the type of environment. And I'm not even defending ivermectin per se, but just the idea that I mean, when you see that there's just this push by everyone, and they're telling doctors, if you prescribe it, you're going to have to fill out all this paperwork, or, they're intercepting it in the mail. They let prescription drugs come in from Canada for years to like help reduce the costs when they were charging more for here. But ivermectin, oh, they're going to stop that one. And that's an establishment decision.
Well, you get these people who are power lusters. So if you're a power luster, you want to seek people who have power and then kind of latch onto them or use them. And so I think that's why they might be giving grants to the prestigious scientist versus the one with some great new idea, because they don't have the motivation to study all this scientific data and know who to give a grant to. They are just power lusters. And so they see someone with power, someone who has a bunch of people backing him at a university or a large fan base, or he's got a popular idea. And so they want to latch onto that and become part of that movement.
It's even like ivermectin. I think somebody, I don't know the details, but somebody won a Nobel Prize in medicine for that. It's not, they're attacking something that has great potential. And I think it's, to your point, I think
all the attacks on Joe Rogan too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's they're attacking. He'll say, oh, we're science. And it's like, no, the science that they're doing, if you look at it with, it's a partnership between government and big pharma. It's almost like they've merged.
Is it true that ivermectin, you couldn't make any money off of it? Is that the drug that was already out of patent?
It's out there. It's it's inexpensive.
Yeah, that probably might be it, because there's no money. So, one
state started selling it over the counter recently. I think Tennessee.
Yeah, but so they want to latch on to people who, can get, like, I guess with these new drugs, like Merck is coming out with some new drug or came out with a new drug, and it's the new stuff that will get you more power, I guess. So they go after that stuff.
Yeah, I think they're benefiting from the pharmaceutical sales, and some of the patents are even held by scientists in government, which is, wouldn't happen, I think, in a private sector. If you're at a company, the work that you do is the company's, but with government, they're benefiting directly from those patents.
It's in ancient Greece, the sophists were intellectuals that could basically be paid to take whatever position you wanted them to pay. But in the most important part of the essay, to me, Rand says, socially, the most destructive consequences of tyranny are spread by an indeterminate, unofficial class of rulers, the officials' favorites. In the history of absolute monarchies, it was the king's favorites who perpetrated the worst iniquities. Even an absolute monarch was restrained to some minimal extent by the necessity to pretend to maintain some semblance of justice in order to protect his image from the people's indignation. But the recipients of his arbitrary, capricious favor held all the privileges of power without any of the restraints. It was among the scrambling, conniving, bootlicking, backstabbing climbers of a royal court that the worst exponents of power for power's sake were to be found. This holds true in any political system that leaves an opportunity open to them. In an absolute monarchy, in a totalitarian dictatorship, in a mixed economy. This provides some crucial context to the view that censorship is only by means of the government. what she's saying is, yes, in a society moving towards a quasi-aristocracy in the form of an establishment, the rulers can delegate the dirty work to non-governmental enforcers. Hollywood, the media, scientific consensus are some quick examples that come to mind. But, you know, when they're backing the agenda of one party, then that is how cancel culture creates a psychological culture and an atmosphere of censorship, even if it doesn't seem to be happening directly by the government.
Well, it seems like the regulators are the favored class. You know, so you get the elected officials, and then they hire, you know, the long-term government officials who regulate things and run the departments. And so they become the favored class, and then the elected officials look the other way while the regulators do their thing and wield their power, which then the people struggle to deal with the regulators because it's basically an arbitrary system. You don't know, like, if they're going to come after you one day or not. You know, it depends on how much they can get out of you, or what if there's public pressure to go after you. So it's a vicious cycle, I think. And I don't know how you would get around it. It's been happening in government after government. It's like a commonality among various types of government.
I mean, the regulators are one aspect, but there's also even just like, you know, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman is, you know, like the most widely influential economist. He can, you know, help stave off and try to pretend that, you know, Biden's spending didn't lead to inflation. And that impacts and helps give him political cover.
But why is he popular?
He's getting the funding. Why would you, that goes back to why would you challenge it? He's this famous economist now that the darling of the left.
Yeah, he's a Keynesian. He writes for the New York Times. He's won a Nobel Peace Prize. He's got all the credentials.
Did he get a bunch of government grants?
I mean, I'm sure he did. I don't even know how much the money matters to him more than the influence. But you know, he's a professor somewhere, and you know, I mean, he's consulted on, you know, a lot of these big projects, but that's just one example. I mean, there's a lot of other people at the New York Times that are helping push policy as well. Thomas Friedman's always getting involved in foreign affairs.
Well, you know, there might be an indirect effect, because when I think about it, the government runs the schools, and then so they push some sort of agenda, progressive education agenda or whatever, and then that produces the Paul Krugmans. And so since the culture is primed to accept the Paul Krugmans, he becomes popular. You know, his idea, what he's spouting, is basically what people want to hear, what they've been taught that they want to hear.
It's what the government officials want to hear.
Well, there's even the press, going back to the press agency. I mean, or you know, the Nobel Peace Prize is even manipulated. They know that that's going to confer a level of, you know, oh, look, he's won this Peace Prize. And even that's manipulated behind the scenes. You know, it can be, oh, if we can get this and we can sway the people that are on the board for the Nobel Peace Prize, it'll give him more credence, you know?
Yeah, it's technically economics, but it's a minor issue.
I thought you said that Krugman won a Nobel Peace Prize.
He won a Nobel Prize. If I said peace, I misspoke. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But she goes on, today, what we see in this country's intellectual field is one of the worst manifestations of political power, ruled by favorites, by the unofficially privileged, by private groups with governmental power, but without governmental responsibility. They are shifting, switching groups, often feuding among themselves, but united against outsiders. They are scrambling to catch momentary favors, their precise status unknown to their members, their rivals, or their particular patrons among the hundreds of congressmen and the thousands of bureaucrats who are now bewildered and intimidated by these Frankenstein creations. As in any other game devoid of objective rules, success and power in this one depend on barkers, again, press agents, and bluff. Now, she continues saying, this is important. private cliques have always existed in the intellectual field, particularly in the arts, but they used to serve as checks and balances on one another so that a nonconformist could enter the field and rise without the help of a clique. Today, the cliques are consolidated into an establishment. I find this part fascinating because she's somewhat defending the history of private cliques as checks and balances, but I mean, they've often been used as a way to cast out those with different opinions, even at the Ayn Rand Institute or, you know, the collective in her time. But she's identifying groups, you know, multiple groups of those cliques as what forms the establishment.
I think when the government starts getting its claws into an industry that has cliques, then that the cliques based system transfers into the government. It's I'm not sure that it's something that originates with government power. I think it's basically a symptom of a culture. So you have a culture that believes in these cliques and, you know, uses these groups to control who can get in, who can become a fireman or who can become a policeman. Then it's kind of like they have these like hazing rituals or whatever, and you kind of try to regulate who they let into the club, you know,
Yeah.
and that kind of becomes the system of the government as well.
But how much of that is just like not even human nature, but almost like primate or mammal nature, where, you know, I mean, you even see where there's like, you know, the dominant silverback and, you know, he's there and, you know, if someone's causing too much trouble, they chase him away.
Yeah, I think it is a very natural thing. And if we were to do a show on it, we'd probably discover that there's some good aspects to it, and it kind of it weeds out people who don't belong in a certain class or a certain part of society.
Well, I mean, I've come to, I don't identify with anarchism, but I at least understand that I think what they were trying to do is to just eliminate all of these hierarchies in groups. And, you know, we always talk about it creates a vacuum, and then, but it's because these hierarchies may just be part of our nature.
No, I think there is a survival aspect to it where they kind of where it comes from. But I do think there is something to having cliques that are somewhat faceless and anonymous. And she talks about that kind of unleashes a special kind of fear. And you can't fight something you don't know, right? So if you try to join an organization and there's this power clique that's there, but you don't even know who is at the top of the pyramid, and you're not even sure who is a member of the clique, you can't really, there's no way to fight it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can happen, but many times you do know who the top dogs are.
Well, it's kind of the difference between an ordered group that has rules and standards versus like an arbitrary cult that has a leader who just dictates everything that goes on. So you have these different types of groups, and some people, they want to be a servant. They want to be told what to do. They want to obey. You know, they fall in love with a charismatic leader, and that's their personality. And then there are other people, maybe more logical or scientific, and they want to hear arguments. They want to hear the reasons, and you know, they're looking for a leader who has a more rational system. So these sorts of traits, I think, will just transfer naturally into a government, because a government is a government of a society, and you know, the way the society is made up, that's kind of what's going to become of the government.
Well, and I mean, there have been kingdoms since, you know, probably the beginning of human history. She goes on to say the term establishment was not generally used or heard in this country until about a decade ago. The term originated in Great Britain, where it was applied to the upper class families, which traditionally preempted certain fields of activity. So I think she's identifying that the establishment is a move towards a kind of neo-aristocracy. You know, the aristocracy of pull was a chapter title in Atlas Shrugged, but it's a type of, as we move away from freedom, it's this kind of, you know, new form where it's not kings, but it's these, you know, woke champions or whoever the power brokers are today.
I was gonna say, I think it follows the power of the purse a little bit too. I think you have to have this, there's funding for these, you know, governmental cliques or these power elites. They have to have money, right? So that's their lifeblood. So there's always some way to appropriate the funding or get, you know, they have kind of a blank check on the taxpayer or.
Yeah, it makes it real easy when it's the king's friends.
And then the king is just going out and taking people's wealth literally. So it's like this, it's like this you know, free flowing wealth or you know, redistribution of wealth from one group to another. And then it's like, and then it becomes, it is survival. It's like you have to live, you have to serve, you know, you have to have money to live, and you don't want to lose your livelihood, you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to be cast out of the group. So you have to kind of go along.
Yeah.
It's interesting that she's saying that the word establishment started in Great Britain. And when you think of Great Britain, you think of the royal family. And the royal family is basically an established ruling elite. And that seems to be something that probably came out of nature. Like you have powerful people, and then they become the leaders, and then then they prefer their family and friends, and so you get this group that becomes the ruling family and the royal court, and so it seems like it might not all be bad. You know, I had sympathy for the establishment in Trump versus Clinton. So I was concerned that Trump was going to tear down the establishment. And I'm like, well, I don't want anarchy. There's some elements of the establishment that have developed over history and tradition, and you see that there's value in it because some of it works and maintains society and keeps people, you know, it keeps people working and happy. And so I think there are elements of the establishment that should be preserved, but it really needs to be studied and figured out. We got to figure out scientifically and logically, like, what are the good aspects of this ruling class, and, you know, what are the bad ones?
Well, she's saying that there wasn't even really an establishment in the US. Now, you could argue that there may have been. There were still like, you know, the Astors thinking they were too good for the Vanderbilts when they started making money and stuff like that. So, you know, maybe there always was, and that it just became more talked about in the last 10 years. But I
think America is so big and complex of a nation that it's hard to pinpoint what the establishment is, because there's two sides. There's conservatives and liberals and libertarians and anarchists and communists and all kinds of different people here. And normally you wouldn't get that in a country. A country is, most countries in the world are smaller. They have more of a communal feel. They share the same ideas, same food, same culture. So you get a more united people. But in America, it's a lot different. It's just we're a nation of a bunch of immigrants.
Well, I think if you go back and look at Europe and whenever Christianity was on the decline, so, you know, you had the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope, and that kind of ruled everybody's life. They had the power and the armies, and then it kind of shifted to the great monarchies and like all these like little families and you know, fighting and infighting between the monarchies went on. And then the monarchies kind of got mad at the church, and they didn't want to send all their money to the church. And so then there was like this split. But then there was kind of like an alliance reached later, I think, toward modern times, where they kind of realized, and that's kind of where this modern kind of ruling class, or almost like an oligarchy, came from, where it's like they can kind of work,
I think as
together
liberal
and control
forces gained more power in the early 19th century, you did see the aristocracy and the church try to, you know, unite against that, to you know, when their power was on the wane.
but I don't think I still think the principle is the government should not be involved with anything ideological and thought. I go back to that principle and I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like government should be there to protect individual rights. They should have standing armies to protect from foreign invasion, and they should have the police to protect from criminalities, because only governments and criminals can violate your rights.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
challenge it again. Do you think that's an ideology? That what you just said, that government should protect individual rights and have a military and all of that? Isn't that an ideology?
The logistics of how to enforce it are.
I mean, just the ideas
I
that
think
she
that's the
said.
proper role of government. And I think that if you're going to be as a citizen of a government, I'm putting the monopoly of force. I'm a lot like they have the monopoly on force. I don't go, there's no like armed roving gangs that go around protecting people. There are still criminals that are going to happen if you go out, if you didn't have any police and you didn't have any, anybody with that was legal, that had legalized use of force. I mean, that's kind of how I would define government almost. Like how do you should government, what is government to you? How would you define it?
Well, I agree,
Guys,
in principle with what Ayn Rand said. I mean, government is there to protect the people, and to protect them, protect their rights, and from criminals within the land and foreign invaders and all that type of stuff. And you can debate the details on what protecting the people means. But what I'm asking you, because I think you said that the government shouldn't be involved in ideological matters, but don't they need an ideology?
is it possible not to have an ideology?
No, I don't think it is. I think that's,
well, I think an ideology, there's different between is saying that the earth revolves around the sun an ideology. No, there's fact. You can have,
but something about as complex as individual rights isn't as empirically obvious.
Well,
is that a fact? I mean,
I think in order to survive, you need to be able to use your mind. In order to use your mind, you have to be free.
But those principles end up being a set of beliefs or an ideology.
That's interestingly exactly what that guy Yuval Harari, the guy that wrote Homo sapiens, that's his line of argument, that the whole Constitution and the whole founding of America and is all just a story. But I don't think it's just it's not a story.
I don't think it's a story.
Yeah.
If you mean we can't determine whether it's true or not. I think, just because your ideology is factual or based in facts, that doesn't mean it's not an ideology.
So
would you say objective? Let's assume we agree that most of or all of objectivism is factual and based on facts and true. It's still an ideology, right?
So what's your definition of an ideology?
Well, an ideology is a system of ideas that relate your worldview and your position on morality and politics.
And if your worldview is based on objective fact, doesn't it become science at that point? Science and ideology to me are two different things.
But people use that to justify their own ideologies. They're like, this isn't political, it's just science. It's just the way things are.
I think ideology is at a meta level.
Axioms that are self-evident, that anyone can
even the axioms themselves still have to be explained. You can't expect people to just take them as self-evident. It's just, these are the principles that we accept and we're right to, but even that itself, there's still individuals with different beliefs about how the world works, implementing these policies based on their own interpretation.
So if someone says, you have a right to be, to your own life, you're saying that's just an idea that can be challenged?
Well, some people mean that there shouldn't be any crimes or jails because, they're just victims of past oppression or whatever their excuse is. And so you're violating their individual rights by having the police stop them. But that goes back to the principle
that the only way that you violate someone's rights is by use of force. And that's what we give government, that's
but
why
all
we
of
have
that
them.
is still subject to interpretation. I mean, that's my only point.
But
I don't want to get
you're
too
very
far
close
off
to
into the
saying, how
weeds
can we
here.
know anything? You're very close to saying, how can we know anything?
I don't. Well, you're the one saying that people can, not have like an ideology, which we're using almost interchangeably with philosophy.
Are you saying that the government?
I'm saying you can have an objective philosophy. I thought we were objectivists.
No, what I'm trying to get, was discussing the view of government. So when you say government shouldn't be, I don't know if I'm getting your words right, but the government shouldn't be involved in ideology or take ideological matters in hand. Are you saying that the government, as the people of the government, like the people who run the government, like the president, he shouldn't have, an ideology when it comes to his ruling, the executive branch, or the congressman, when they vote, they shouldn't have an ideology when they pass laws? How does it work for a government not to have an ideology?
I mean, yeah, government is made up of, millions of people that work, these, bureaucrats that work there. I think that HHS has like 80,000 employees. I'm sure they all have a worldview and their own philosophy, but they shouldn't be able to force it on other people. They shouldn't be using their power to say, my ideology is correct and you have to think this way. And we're going to put all this funding into this and force it into education and indoctrinate people. I think when you start, I would separate government and education. I would separate government and science.
Yeah, but where's like a locality where that's happening?
That's well, that goes back to what Yaron Brooks said. It's just, is that just the way the world works? And we're gonna give up and say, okay, we shouldn't fight.
I'm not saying that's the way the world works, but you're just, you're saying that we just need to have, so no one's having an ideology. And I'm not.
I didn't say that. Everybody has their own worldview. Everybody has to have their own worldview, and they act on it. They have their own beliefs.
But what is it? What's your point of contention?
You're saying that the idea that man has a right to his own life and he's an end in himself is just an arbitrary idea.
Not arbitrary, but it's an idea.
I would put ideological, like I would say ideological is like,
but you haven't convinced everybody in the government that that's just natural and not open to debate.
I think that's what the country was founded on, is the idea that you have your own right to life.
Even if it was founded on it, that's not where we are today.
Well, we still have the Constitution.
Right. But even within the Constitution, there are people that are interpreting it in ways that with their ideology for whatever ends they want.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong. I think that you have to go back to the principle that I have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and anything infringing on that's forcing me to do something.
You make it seem like if we just had some objectivists in government, that there would be no ideology, or that everything would be completely objective. And they can't even get their own act together in their own group.
I'm saying we use science and reason and logic and principles. And
that's what Fauci says he's doing.
Well, he's not. He's clear.
But anyone can say we're just going to use science and facts, and that you can still bend ideology around that.
I think if you try to make a distinction between ideology and scientific theory, there might be an issue there, because a science, just because it's considered science, that doesn't mean it's true. So scientists can come up with some theory or even assert a scientific fact, and they could be wrong and then disproven later. So,
but I don't want government bureaucrats engaged in that activity that you just described. That's not their job, is what I'm saying.
Okay, what I'm saying is that you have a constitution for a nation that promotes a certain view, and hopefully it's based on political science. But if they could be wrong, and then if they're wrong, does that mean it's an ideology? Or are you saying that the science that the Constitution is based on could be
no, you can't change an ideology. You can't change the nature of man.
I feel like maybe we've gotten off from the main topic.
Well,
I'm saying
this is interesting.
you're never gonna
Right.
you're never gonna change the idea that you, if I'm, you know, that the moral system is to protect the individual right to their own life. That's not,
Okay,
I
well,
mean, that
but there
otherwise,
might be details. There might be that they may have gotten some aspects of that principle right and some wrong.
I
Like,
don't want to.
don't you
And the
think
implementation.
there were some problems with the original Constitution, such as slavery?
So you would accept a little bit of force against you? I mean, I guess there's a trade-off, but I think that's what allows it to grow out to the point where we are now, where they're censoring people for speech, and they're saying you don't have a right to, you know, illegal searches and seizures are going to start, you know, then anything goes.
You haven't shown how your way's going to fix it.
It's not I mean, it's not about like, oh, that's, and then it goes back to the pragmatic view. It's like, it's still the principle. You still stick to the principle. You don't give in.
No, because the principle without action is rationalism.
Right. I'm saying I think the nature of man is to be free. People have a right to use they need to use their mind to survive.
That still has to be discussed about, you know, how to do that, or getting everyone else to agree, certainly the ones in the bureaucracy that are making these policies, if we're not getting rid of the bureaucracy itself.
I think we'd have to discuss what freedom means in a social context, because when we form a society, you accept that there are certain limitations on your freedom, such as the police have a right to detain you if they suspect you of a crime. That's initiation of force. It's retaliatory force, but it might be wrong.
But then you have the court system, and you have a right to a fair trial, and you have all of that, you know, all of the
if you don't die in the interaction with the cop.
Yeah. So yeah, I understand that there is a process here, and that's kind of the process you agree to, is that when you live in a society, you're going to agree that the cops have this right to try you for a crime, even if you're innocent. And I'm saying that there are also issues where there are people who like just completely threaten the way of everyone's life because they want to overturn the government through the democratic process. And that can be considered a violation of your rights. And then the government should have a process where they determine whether you're actually doing that, whether you're actually trying to destroy the government.
Well, it's a fascinating sidebar. We may have material for another show. Just getting back a little bit here to the essay, she continues that rule by unofficially privileged private groups spreads as a special kind of fear, like a slow poison injected into the culture. You know, we had Phil Magnus from AIER on an earlier episode, and he's the one who exposed emails between Fauci and Collins discussing the need for a devastating takedown of the Great Barrington Declaration. Yaron Brook on his show was asked about whether that was evidence of a corrupt establishment. I'll link to the whole answer in the show notes, which is probably 2 minutes long, but he seems to end by shrugging.
I'm against government and science, but government isn't science, and you're not going to avoid the government having, scientists in the government having opinions and expressing those opinions. And when something they think is wrong, saying it's wrong. They believe that is their job. That's not some weird conspiracy. That's just the way the world works.
You'll have to forgive me if I'm not as ready to just accept Fauci's tipping the scales in favor of people who agree with him as just the way the world works.
Yeah, it's not the way the world has to work. I mean, I'm not sure, this is just a small clip, so I'm not sure what the whole context was, but government and science should be the focus, right? I mean, why is he even apologizing for the way it is? It's like we need to accept their opinions because this is the way the world works, or we need to understand that this is the way the world works, and so we should trust the scientists. Is that what he's saying?
I don't know. It's just that I was saying, isn't that an example of a corrupt establishment? And then, he was just saying, no, that, this is just, we may not like government to be in science, but they are in science and they're going to have their opinions. For example, he agrees with them on vaccines. So, their stuff about vaccines that's not a conspiracy theory, that they're just, they're enforcing what they believe. Or in this case, it was the Great Barrington Declaration, which basically was against lockdowns.
Well, if that was the context, then I think it probably is evidence of corruption, because it's showing that Fauci was biased, against the Great Barrington Project and trying to use government resources to manipulate the culture and manipulate the view of the scientific community.
Yeah. Rand also goes on to say that many men are capable of dying on the barricades for a big issue, but few, very few, are able to resist the gray suction of small, unheralded day-by-day surrenders. So she's calling out how effective the boiled lobster approach is as far as sucking out our courage.
Yeah, it sounds like that. I mean, that's pretty much what's going on. Is that
that's what he was just talking about, really.
Yeah, when
that's
she's
just the way
saying,
it is, right? It gets so big that there's no. It's like almost like, how do you stop it? It's what you guys were saying to me earlier. Just how do you?
It's what she was saying about courage, that she's not brave enough to be a coward because she sees the consequences, that there's not just one surrender, that you have to surrender over and over again.
Well, people who want power want more and more power, so they have to take that from somebody. So basically, it's a monster that keeps growing and growing, because they don't really care about our rights. And that's my whole basis for arguing for the Socialist Control Act, is that if we don't control them, they're just going to use their willingness to apply force to take more and more power. And we're just going to we'll tolerate it until there's a segment of society that is intolerant and is willing to actually fight the government.
I understand the sentiment. That ship probably sailed. I mean, even McCarthy couldn't pull it off. So and it had a lot less cultural influence back then.
I don't like your defeatist attitude, Scott.
I don't either. And I think if we're gonna do it, we need to do it now while we have like Clarence Thomas there. And you can't. I mean, you have to say, like you say it all the time, Scott, that the left is a religion, that it's a religion. So if you can argue like you shouldn't have government laws that support a religion, if you could kind of take it from that angle. I mean, everything about socialism should be discredited. It's antithesis to everything we stand for. You have individual rights, or you have socialized rights, and I think you can argue that, and you can have that debate. You have to bring that.
I've even said that the right to if you can't incite violence, should you be able to incite theft? Exactly. And so I'm there in spirit, but I mean, I'm really just thinking about the practical implications of going out there and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and pass legislation that socialists can't hold office anymore.
Well, I'm giving the broad stroke idea. And it's going to be up to, I think, local politicians to begin it at the local level. So I think if you can ban books from a school, you should be able to ban socialists from a school or something like that. They should, at a local level, they can do it. I think they can make little steps, baby steps, and then start the ball rolling in whatever capacity they can, whatever laws, whatever legal ways are open to them. And then you get the conversation started. So just basically what I'm trying to do is get some sort of conversation started, get some sort of logic established, get an argument forming, so that we can pursue this attack against socialism. And we need to do it in all sorts of different ways. It's not just some sort of control act. It's got to be at every level.
Well, you know, like I said, I'm open to having the conversation, but
you have to expose them too. You have like these nameless, faceless cliques. I think you need investigative journalism. You have to fight against the propaganda that's out there and the press agents that she talks about. You have to, yeah, you
I
have
just
to.
think we have to unite the liberty movement, and then, you know, all of us come together on our own sort of consensus, not to use a loaded term.
Well, if we could unite the liberty movement against what I think is an obvious big target, the Democratic Socialist Party, I mean, why not just try to unite against them? I mean, that's the big target. They have people in Congress.
Yeah,
So,
that's ultimately what it is. And then, but then, I mean, we need to do that before we start, you know, the Socialist Control Act.
But I
we
think
need to start. Yeah, go ahead.
the principles of the United States Constitution, I mean, we have that foundation there in the Bill of Rights. I mean, like that, there's a reason that they start attacking, silencing opposition, and they attack free speech first. Like that's the fundamental, you can't lose that battle. And she even talks about that in the essay. As long as you haven't gone down that abyss where you have censorship, you know, when people can't say what they want, then you have a chance to come out of it. But if once you lose free speech, I mean,
My response to that is that we've already lost free speech. We just don't realize it.
well, we're
We
here
have,
talking right now and we're not, nobody's knocking on my door, you know, I mean, not yet.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
because
to a,
you're not saying things as a government official. So my point before was, just because you have free speech doesn't mean that we're not losing free speech in other parts of the culture. Like, what if you're a medical, if you're in the medical industry and you can't say certain things to patients? It's like, so you don't have free speech.
well,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Rand addresses that. She says, if a man senses that he ought to speak up, he is stopped by the routine, who am I to know, of modern skepticism, to which another paralyzing clause is added in his mind, whom would I displease? And so that's that self-censorship. Yeah, there's a lot of things that people can say that they're just not saying because they're afraid to. I mean, I agree with her, even if we know more about the woke gods that we're not supposed to displease these days.
Yeah, wokeism is trying to control language. So that's a perfect example of where we're losing free speech. And there's a lot of social pressure coming from that movement to stop people from talking on social media, stop hate speech, stop, you know, so-called hate speech, stop gender misidentification or whatever it's called. You know, there's all these crazy things, and they're just attempts to control what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, they're small incremental attempts.
But I think we have the Constitution to go back on and fight it in court. I think you have. I think it's a. I think
The
it's
Constitution's been there this whole time while we've been losing these issues.
I know, but now it needs to be challenged. Like now that you have like, so Elon Musk is, you know, he's trying to buy Twitter. It's like he's able, he's got the funding, but it's like somebody has to fight back and say, you know, no, you can't just silence people on a public forum for their political views. Like that needs to be protected.
Well,
And I do agree. Political. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say there needs to be more of a focus on moral bravery generally within the liberty movement.
Yeah, well, that comes to the moral problem, moral conundrum in the country, right? Is what Ayn Rand was, her primary focus was on the morality. So we need to get rid of this self-sacrificial, tolerant of evil type of culture.
Yeah,
and you become more self-interested, more rational, more you know, capitalistic, and, you know, all these virtues that we need to change the culture. And I was going to say previously when we were talking about Twitter, I think Elon Musk should focus on buying the government and changing it.
Not with that debt.
That is not the government. Yeah, government is the very definition of non-private. You
know? But to your point, William, she goes on in that vein, Rand, she says, we do not know how many young innovators may exist today and struggle to be heard, but we will not hear of them because the establishment would prefer not to recognize their existence and not to take any cognizance of their ideas. you know, in a growing number of fields, they'll just shut down those that don't go along with the woke establishment, no matter how much else they have to offer.
I'd like to see funding for dissidents. If we're going to have this government funding of research, then we could frame it like this. Look, this is wrong. We should get rid of government funding in the sciences, but if you're going to do it, there needs to be some money allocated for dissident views.
I mean, you know, they would argue that they're probably giving tons of money to anarchists.
Like, they need to give money to the flat earthers, seriously. Because if they're going to give money at all, they need to show that they're not biased. And the only way to do that is to say, all right, we're going to give money to the craziest theory we can find.
I think Rand's saying that there's inherent bias when they start funding.
I don't think
He's being a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I think it would expose the
that,
absurdity. It's a rhetorical device, right? Yeah, so it's like exposing their absurdity through parody.
But I mean, you can't. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think you have to fight them on legal grounds. That's my thought. I don't think there's any other way. We have rule of law. I mean, we still do at this point, and we still have free speech to a certain degree. We haven't reached total censorship where we have, you know, I mean, we're getting close. I mean, definitely, like, on the continuum, it's getting worse. But I think people need to be brave and stand up and say, I have a right to my ideology, my ideas, and I have a right to say what I want. And let's talk about it and debate the ideas and see which is the better solution, or which one is really the fact, you know. Like, let's talk about it. Let's get to the facts, and I
think we're seeing that some more. I'm seeing it more out of libertarians. I used to be less positive about libertarians, but I've seen, you know, not all of them, but some of them have become brave now, and it should be applauded.
So objectivists like to say, oh, the best arguments will win out, and that's kind of what I'm hearing here. But the point of the essay is that government can destroy the culture by encouraging your enemies. So we're fighting. We're kind of like in a losing position here. We're thinking we have the best ideas, so people will hear us and we'll win out in the end. No, that's not going to happen. The government is going to take your money and give it to your enemy, and so your enemy has a bigger voice than you. And since the masses don't really care about intellectual matters too much, they're just going to go along with the popular view. And since the government is funding the views and making them popular, that, you know, your enemy will have the popular view. So I think we need to get away from this view that all we need to do is have free speech and spout our great ideas. That's not going to work.
No, but you have to stop being silenced, though. You have to say the government doesn't have a right to go after people that are saying certain things, and they can't censor people that aren't agreeing with them.
Yeah, as a first step.
But so going back to the power issue, is that if you don't have control over the government purse, you're going to lose, because they have the power. So we need to be willing to take the power, whatever way we can.
Well, I don't
know about whatever way we can. Hopefully it'll be.
Well, if you want to save the culture, you have to be willing to do what it takes. That's my point.
Well, I understand the spirit there, but now she gets a little bit, I don't want to say negative here, but she says, today, originality, integrity, independence have become a road to martyrdom, which only the most dedicated will choose, knowing that the alternative is worse. A society that sets up these conditions as the price of achievement is in deep trouble. So, you know, I mean, I like to see Elon Musk and others starting to stand up as positive exceptions. She may get a little negative, but not necessarily unfairly. I mean, I do think that this part also relates to movements, even the objectivist movement, and sometimes having originality is a good way to get you kicked out and say, oh, you're not an objectivist.
Yeah.
I would think, well, I don't know. It made me think of what I've heard Jordan Peterson say kind of the same thing. And maybe it was talking about postmodernism, or maybe it came from Marcuse. I can't remember, but it was something about like at some point, like you can't, you have to have so much power in order to fight back against the establishment. You either have to be a billionaire or you have to have nothing to lose. Like they've kind of set it up where it's either what, like it makes it really hard for anybody to fight against it, and I think that's where we are.
Yeah, I remember him saying to his that any student that he decided to sponsor for their master's or doctorate or whatever, that they were going to have a target on their back, and that's part of the reason he stepped back from his position in Canada.
Well, it's interesting that she frames this as a system. She says a system rigged against intelligence and integrity. When you do find intelligent people in the enemy camp, but what I think she's really trying to get at is that the system's rigged against people who are against the system. It's pretty much as simple as that. It's like the system wants to maintain itself. The establishment wants to remain the establishment. So they look around, they see who's attacking them, and then they attack back, or they undermine you in some weird way, some shrewd way, and they ruin your life. And that's what happens. And so if you don't bend the knee to the establishment, you're a threat.
Right. I think that you have to use what you have. You have to use the tools that you have, which is you'd have to have like a convention of states to come forward and say, this is going on in the government. It's wrong at the federal level, and we want to change it. I think there's a way, there's still hope, I think, for.
Yeah, there may still be hope, but I don't know if a convention of states could make things worse too. Depending on, who's calling the shots there.
If it was a convention of states, say, against the censorship going on.
Yeah, but I mean, how much, woke is in the average state politician?
Well, no, but I mean, I think it would have to, you'd want it to be a liberty alliance. You'd want it to be people that were constitutionalists and,
I don't know how you do that and make sure it's all your people. Each state's going to send their own representatives.
Well, it's kind of just as difficult to get the liberty movement organized, isn't it?
Well, at least we can start to organize it along our, and then, build it from there. But that's different than just dictating who gets to go to the Constitutional Convention to me. But
well, as long as we're not building our alliance based on these Machiavellian cliques, I think we're okay.
That's the right attitude. Well, Rand ends the piece by saying that, she spoke about the pyramid of ability in Atlas Shrugged, but that there's another kind of social pyramid, the genius who fights every form of tyranny over the mind of man is fighting a battle for which lesser men do not have the strength, but on which their freedom, their dignity, and their integrity depend. It is the pyramid of moral endurance. Which I think that helping people not cave, to the establishment and promoting moral endurance could be a great function of a united liberty movement.
I think she's talking about perseverance.
Yeah.
In the ethical sphere, so sticking to your principles. It's basically, integrity. So I think that's important. I think she's trying to appeal to the man of integrity, the man of principle, who doesn't compromise in the face of the enemy, that sort of thing. And when she spoke of martyrdom, that's kind of what a lot of freedom fighters face, because they're up against, almost dictatorship, in my opinion.
But does this get to a blurred distinction? Because she's saying, she tells us not to be martyrs.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to focus on the word martyr. I'm not sure of the origin. I guess it's religious, probably in origin. But I don't see a problem with dying for your freedom or dying for something you think is more important than your life. Like you
Right, a
can't
higher
live,
value.
you can't live without this thing. And if liberty and your freedom is that thing, that's your value system, and you're willing to fight for that. And I think maybe like a suicidal mission might be, you might want to question that. Like if you just are going to go off and throw yourself on the spike or something for a
Right.
cause, but you try to be as clever as you can in fighting the enemy. But if you have no hope, then, and maybe you're dying because you want to be a symbol to your family or your friends and you want them to rise up, and it's more important to you to stick to your guns and stick to your principle, and if there's no out, then you're going to die and you have to accept that.
I
Well,
mean,
it's
some
kind
of it is.
okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you can think of Wycliffe, he was burned at the stake. He would not, like the church was saying, deny science. And he was saying, no, I'm not going to. And so, I mean, he like sometimes, I think that's like a true martyr of like, this is the hill I'm going to die on. I mean, I think
Right.
you saw that Thomas Paine in The Crisis too, when he says, there's, there's going to be a few men that step up and fight for freedom, and not everybody's built for that, but the ones that do should be like, everybody owes everything to them.
She's letting people know that if you decide to take this on, you're going to be attacked.
Yeah.
And I could argue that, some of these liberty organizations aren't getting attacked enough. Doesn't mean I want them to be attacked. I just want to see them stand up to the left more.
Yeah, and
but
saying that, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just say, look at how easily some people cave. Like they'll cave because they are unwilling to use the pronoun that it makes scientific sense or biological sense. Because there's pressure to use a certain pronoun, and so they'll cave. And even though they don't believe, what the woke believe about gender, they'll still use the pronouns they want, that the woke want you to use. And it's such a little thing. It's like they fear, the woke cult has gotten so powerful that people fear losing their jobs just in identifying a man as a man. It's become super crazy.
That was actually Jordan Peterson's rise to fame over that. He was in that panel, and he just said, I'm not going to use your pronoun. I'm going to call you, like, that's mind control, and he wouldn't give in. And then he became really popular after that.
I know. I've met so many objectivists who won't go there. It's just like, it's real crazy. It's like they're wishy-washy on that easy topic to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, there are practical considerations about where best to take a stand, and but I think the takeaways from this essay for me are that there can be quasi-official institutions acting on behalf of certain factions in government, and that they're a combination of ruling cliques telling us what we have to believe to not be considered fringe, which makes people self-censor, and some even decide that they agree with everything they're told to agree with.
It's really the question of, what do you value more, objective reality or friendship, or your job or something like that? I guess it's between your ideology and your work, like making money and surviving, and that's tough.
Yeah, and some of those are legit judgment calls.
I would just say never give up your moral autonomy, like she says. Just like don't, what is it? And don't, when they tell you to say 2 + 2 is 5, just know it's you just have to stand by what you know to be right. And I think it's always the age-old battle. It's the individual versus the state. Now we have this behemoth state, and so I think individuals just have to stand up, and we're all in it together at this point. Just you have to stand up for the what's, you know, for what's right, which is, I think men need to be free. So
I saw someone joking. I just want to be able to call myself an anti-disestablishmentarian.
not a
It's a real
monarchist.
question. It's a real question of how do you make that decision of when to stand up, when to fight for your views, like what is important. You know, they've driven politics out of polite conversation, basically. So you can't. It's hard to talk politics with some people because we're so divided these days on important issues. Such as the nature of human beings, like what is a male and what is a female. We've gotten to such a degraded point in knowledge that we don't even know how to differentiate between the sexes anymore. It's ridiculous.
It's a great loyalty test, though, to see who will say what they want them to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the religious part of it. That's the struggle session of, you know, the litmus test for which side you're on.
It goes back to the emperor's new clothes.
Oh yeah.
I think you have to stick to principles. I think I mean, I agree with, you know, you have to at least, it's like what you talk about with momentum. You have to move in the right direction. You have to move in the direction of getting government and disentangled from science and control, at least saying it can't control science, and start and argue it. And I think, and as a practical step, I am very much in favor of term limits at this point. We have it in almost every office, but we don't have it for Senate and representatives, and I think we need it.
Definitely. Yeah.
I wouldn't
we
mind
need to bring
seeing,
back term limits.
Maybe taking any of those government science agencies, the CDC, the WHO, and like almost using antitrust on them to say there can't just be one. There have to be two, and they have to be, you know, people with headed by people with different views, or at least willingness to take different positions, so that there's more checks and balances on just everyone agreeing with each other because, you know, for whatever interests or ideology they're pushing.
Well, now you're getting into ideological matters.
Well, and not to use the words of hate speech, but it's like, it's almost like you need a war on many battlefronts. You know, you need like the people that are doing the FOIA requests and the investigative hearings, and you know, that needs to go on. Then you need the judicial fight against the people being censored. It's like all of these things need to be happening, and it's like we all need to be, you know, it's like it all needs to happen, I think, to push the momentum back the other way, which is to get government out of our lives.
Yeah, at least reduce it on the way. That's a good spirit. Good kind of final thought. Any other final thoughts for you, William?
Yeah, let me just bring up one thing here. So Rand, in the essay, she says, it is viciously improper for the government to subsidize the enemies of our political system. And I just want people to think about that. If it's improper, if it's viciously improper for government to just subsidize your enemies, how improper is it to vote them into power, to make them the government? And I think we should really start thinking about this aspect of the establishment and, you know, how we let these people become the establishment by voting them into power. And there needs to be some check on that. There needs to be some control. So that's my final point. And I think we had a great conversation this time. I look forward to analyzing more of Rand's articles.
Absolutely. Me too. Allison, thank you so much for joining us again today. It was great having you on, and you know, it was good. You two had a little back and forth that I think the audience will enjoy.
Yeah, thanks. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm glad we could have this conversation about this essay. It's a great essay, and there's lots of crucial principles I think she identifies with how this behemoth happened, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, this has been the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.